So I wanted to talk a little bit about the coup that just took place in Niger and the Russia-Africa summit, really underscore the difference between Russia and the West. You know, politics, what is politics? Politics is about finding a common interest, right? Imperialism is about exploiting. Screw you, I'm going to take everything you have and I'm going to trample on you till the end of time. You are seeing in real time in Africa a pivot from the West, from Britain, France, the US, towards Russia. Now, how do all of these things intersect? I mean, very simply, you know, Russia does things by the book. They're straightforward with you. The Chinese are the same. Whereas Western countries have a history, you know, century after century after century of lying, cheating, stealing. And this is an unfortunate fact. So number one, let's start with the grain deal, right? The tagline was that Russia wants to starve children in Africa, and that's why Putin, you know, he just woke up and he decided to pull out of the grain deal. They don't actually tell you that, oh, it's the West who did not hold up their end of the deal. The grain deal was very clear that you have to allow both Russia and Ukraine, not only Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine, to export agricultural products. Russia was unable to because the West refused to lift sanctions. So now Putin at the Russia-Africa summit decides to gift a whole bunch of grain to Africa. Not only free of charge, but also free shipping, the whole bunch. So that not only shows you that there's no bad blood between the Russians and the African leaders and countries who attended the summit, but that this whole, you know, the entire saga surrounding the grain deal, the reporting is so dishonest. It's so boring and childish. And just this summit itself, the Russia-Africa summit, which took place yesterday, if you go read the horrible press that we have in England and in America, they think it was a failure because only 17 African leaders showed up, as opposed to 43 African leaders in 2019, right? It's like their brains are so dumb and primitive, they cannot grasp that politics moves outside of, you know, numbers. They're like counting the number of leaders on their fingers, like as if that's the only thing that matters. Number one, there's a war on, in case you haven't noticed. So, you know, by sending a leader there, it would appear to you know, it might make a country look like it's no longer neutral, and that's the stance that most of the world has, right? Most of the world is neutral in this conflict in Ukraine. So they might violate their neutral stance. And on top of that, the numbers of African leaders present has nothing to do with this, because if they cannot come, they still send a delegation. And things are moving on the African continent at such a scale and such a pace that these Western journalists, or, you know, they call themselves journalists, they are so petty and in denial. They just refuse to accept what is happening. They refuse to accept that Africa is done with Europe. They're done with all of it. Let me play you this clip, first of all, regarding the shipment of grain.
Мы будем готовы уже в ближайшие месяцы, в ближайшие 3-4 месяца безвозмездно предоставить Буркина-Фасо, Зимбабве, Мали, Сомали, Центральноафриканской Республике, Эритрее по 25-50 тысяч тонн зерна. Обеспечим и бесплатную доставку этой продукции потребителям. Наверное, будут интересны еще несколько цифр. Украина за прошлый сельскохозяйственный год произвела порядка 55 миллионов тонн зерновых. Экспорт составил 47 миллионов тонн. Немало. Из них 17 миллионов тонн пшеницы. А Россия, уважаемые коллеги, Россия собрала в прошлом году 156 миллионов тонн. 60 зерна, 60 миллионов тонн экспортировала. Из них 48 миллионов тонн – это пшеница. Доля России на мировом рынке пшеницы 20%. Украины менее 5%. а значит именно Россия вносит существенный вклад в глобальную продовольственную безопасность и является солидным, ответственным международным поставщиком сельхозпродукции. И те, кто утверждают, что это не так, что только обеспечение вот этой так называемой зерновой сделки по вывозу украинского зерна, просто извращают факты, говорят неправду. Ну, собственно говоря, это на протяжении десятилетий, если не столетий, является практикой некоторых западных государств.
Говорить, I think, is to speak or tell. It's about the only word I could make out of the speech. But two notes before I proceed. The whole premise of why the grain deal must be implemented, right? Because they say Russia pulled out. Russia never pulled out. Russia is still in the grain deal as long as the other side hold up their end of the deal, because Russia's been holding up its end of the deal for a year now. They've had enough of waiting. If the grain deal is so important because it guarantees grain for poorer countries, then why did you block Russia from exporting its agricultural products? And Russia is more important for the supply of wheat and the supply of fertilizer. You know, this is a direct contradiction, because that's exactly what they did. That's why Russia stopped implementing the grain deal, because they didn't hold up their end of the deal. The UN was unable to convince the West to lift sanctions. So this proves they don't actually care about getting wheat to poorer countries. They were blocking it from going to poorer countries. Russia makes more contributions in wheat than anyone. Well, in this case, more than Ukraine, right? Because these are the two parties at hand. So why would you block the Russians from exporting if you really care about it getting to poorer countries? What hypocrisy. And on top of that, when it comes to this premise that Ukraine only sends grain to poor African countries, right? Like they like number one, they have nothing better to do than to wait around for the World Food Program to get a shipment from Odessa. Ukraine sent so much grain last year, okay, to Europe, not these poor countries that they talk about in the press, that they banned it. Ukraine's Eastern European neighbors, Poland, Hungary, and others, banned Ukrainian grain because they flooded the market with it. Do you understand what I'm saying? The Ukrainians put so much grain in Europe that the prices crashed, and it screwed over Polish farmers, Hungarian farmers, and they also complain that it's of lesser quality. Now, I'm not talking about the quality here. I'm just showing you that obviously this wheat is not going to poor countries. It's going to Europe. They have so much of it that they're just sending it there. The majority of it is going to rich countries. Okay, just so we can dispel that myth. Let me show you just another excerpt here.
Сделка была заключена ровно год назад, 22 июля 2022 года. Затем сделка эта, так называемая сделка, не раз продлевалась. Последний раз в мае текущего года, на период до 17 июля включительно. Мы вновь и вновь продлевали эту сделку. И продлевая, проявляли просто чудеса выдержки и терпения, толерантности. Рассчитывали, что наши зарубежные коллеги наконец начнут в полном объеме соблюдать согласованные и одобренные параметры и условия. Однако ничего подобного не происходило. Никаких обязательств, договоренностей выполнять никто не собирался. А только постоянно требовали чего-то от России. Я считаю, что сотрудники ООН искренне стремились к выполнению всех данных Западом обещаний.
I agree with what he's saying. I also really believe that Guterres and all of the UN staff, because remember, this is JCC mission. It's got a representative from Russia, from Ukraine, from Turkey, and from the UN, all working together in Turkey to get this thing working. I really believe the UN tried their best, but they couldn't get the West to budge.
Обещания, но так и не смогли ничего добиться. Ничего практически не сделали для нормальной работы и сделки. А вот для ее срыва наши так называемые партнеры на Западе сил не пожалели. Сделали все, чтобы пустить ее под откос. А сегодня, как у нас в народе говорят, на голубом глазу практически лгут всему миру, говорят о том, что якобы Россия виновата в срыве этой сделки. Более того, чуть ли не во всех бедствиях населения африканских и ряда других стран винят Россию, которые сам Запад в свое время обобрал, столкнув в пучину войн, голода и нищеты. И продолжает сейчас в рамках своей неоколониальной системы грабить эти государства. Он и на зерновой сделке беззастенчиво наживался. Просто полностью извратил смысл этих договоренностей и суть.
I've put together some more interesting clips from the Russia-Africa summit that took place in St. Petersburg. Take a look.
These books, in many ways, the role of Russia and Africa in the fight against Nazism has been forgotten. But today we stand together, and today we're here to talk about the future of our countries and what will happen tomorrow in this new free world to which we aspire for, where there will be no meddling in our domestic affairs. We have shared prospects, and I hope that this summit will provide an opportunity to establish just peace and just world order and relations between our peoples.
Колонизация других стран, работорговля сегодня всеми признается как преступление. Это очевидно. Сегодня все с этим согласны. Но не были согласны, когда шла борьба за независимость в Африке. Не были. Это мы сами хорошо помним. Вот это получение своего флага, как сказал только что коллега, недостаточно. И это очевидно. Вот сохранение монополии некоторых стран в области финансов, в области технологий, в области цифры, да, и в области продовольствия, вот это неприемлемо. С этим нужно бороться. И, конечно, вот многие здесь присутствующие знают, Советский Союз, Россия никогда не исходили из того, что нужно покупать в Африке только сырье. Сколько Советский Союз построил предприятий, электростанций, сталелитейных заводов в Африке. Мы должны вернуться к этой практике, как призвал сейчас коллега. Мы будем это делать и на двухсторонней основе, и на международных площадках.
They are printing money. They are not manufacturing anything at all. It's printing money. And this has been one of their weapons globally. The monetary system, the global monetary system, controlled by dollar and euro, has been used. Sanctions here, sanctions there, sanctions there, grabbing this account, grabbing that account, has been one of their tools. This is not going to continue indefinitely. And we need a new financial architecture globally, not controlled by euro, not controlled by the dollar, not controlled by other currencies.
You know, I find this so funny how in the press, and I swear this is... You'll see this in every outlet. They say now that, you know, Putin is trying to appeal to African leaders by pointing out the hypocrisy of the West and their colonial past. And that, you know, he's trying to put Russia on a pedestal and give it a higher moral standing. Yeah, it has a higher moral standing. What do you think? Like, you think Russia is comparable to what Britain and Portugal and Spain and the Dutch and the Germans and the French did in Africa? What? Of course Russia has moral standing. These people are on crack. The people who are writing this are on crack. There's something wrong with them. They really think that Putin pointing out Western colonialism and Western hypocrisy is like an attempt to make Russia look good. No, it's not an attempt. It does make Russia look good. You have no one to blame but yourselves. Don't go looking at Putin. Putin's not the one who colonized Africa. Jesus Christ, like they really have the nerve to act like he's trying to hoodwink the African leaders like they're children or something, right? This is, again, the way, you see how they write in the press? It's, again, this neo-colonial shit. It's like African leaders, they don't understand that, you know, Russia's trying to fool them. China's trying to fool them, right? No, we would never do that. No, we would never do that. We're about human rights and democracy. Oh, these African leaders are too immature. They don't understand what the Russians are trying to do. This is exactly how they write in the press. To this day, right now as I speak to you. They're trying to mock the Russia-Africa summit. You know why? Because the last Africa summit that the West ever held was the Berlin conference, the Congo conference, right? Which, admittedly Russia attended, but Russia in the end did not colonize Africa. This is a fact. You cannot compare Russia to the Dutch or to the UK or France. I'm sorry. I'm not even going to entertain this nonsense. This is rubbish. There is a ton of African blood on the hands of British banks. If you go to the city of London, which is like, I don't think, I know most of you guys are Americans, so you don't maybe appreciate the status that the city of London has. I don't mean like the city called London. The city of London is a district, like a borough, if you will, in New York. Yeah. Inside of London, that is Wall Street. It's British Wall Street. Okay. And it has its own police force. So if you imagine if Wall Street had its own separate status as an entity and its own police force separate from the NYPD. That is how much control and power these institutions have. And every single bank, HSBC, the Bank of England, all of them traded or owned slaves and financed the slave trade in Britain and in Europe and the United States. Every single one.